Welcome to Part 8 of the King's Gambit under 1000 ELO Masterclass. We have recently been discussing the instance that Black decides to decline the Gambit. That means that here, he decides not to take our pawn offering and opts to play something else like knight to c6, like we covered in the last video. Black really doesn't have that many other options because he needs to defend his e-pawn. In some way, if he is not going to take our pawn, knight c6 was one way, and the next best way is with the d-pawn. This supports the e-pawn. It's important to note that we almost never play the move f-pawns takes e-pawn, at least not early in the game. This pawn is performing the crucial job of preventing queen to h4. With the f-pawn here, we can respond to this queen move with g3. Without the f-pawn, the e-pawn is hanging. With that out of the way, you already know how best to prevent queen to h4, that is with the move knight to f3. Now this isn't the computer's chosen move, and really neither is the King's Gambit. That's not why we're playing it. We're playing it because it is tricky to refute, especially for 1000 and under players. There are several reasons why I recommend this move. First, we are already in the habit of playing knight to f3 early to block h4. It's a good idea to keep this habit, and it's easy to remember. The second reason is that if Black now decides to take our f-pawn, we transpose to a position we have already learned, so it cuts down on the amount of lines we need to learn, which is always good. The third reason is that it puts pressure on e5, and while we need to keep our knight on its post, so we shouldn't be taking the pawn anytime soon, it gives Black something to think about. With that explained, let's dive into the most common move in this position. Knight to c6 played 37% of the time. Generally in the King's Gambit, our next move after getting our knight out has been either d4 or bishop to c4, and both moves are strong here. d4 tends to be a bit trickier to play here, since Black still has his pawn on e5. So I recommend the bishop move. Black most commonly responds with bishop to g4. And now you may be recognizing the idea of the bishop sacrifice on f7. Some lines this idea works and some it doesn't, so take a moment to pause the video and calculate through what would happen if we were to play that move. We take on f7, the king takes back, and we give a knight check, not on e5, but maybe g5. But wait, the queen is attacking that square, and we know that it doesn't work in that case. So we just play something like castle kingside. Let me show you the full refutation in case that was confusing. And we go down 2 pawns worth of material after all is said and done. So always be super careful when sacrificing your bishop on f7. When in doubt, it is safer to just not play that move. That is something you need to be certain of before doing. Okay, back to our main line. Black continues to develop, getting his knight out and attacking our center pawn. And generally d3 is a move we want to play anyway, to solidify our center. So now is a perfect time to play that to protect our center pawn. Black has this common tricky idea of playing knight to d4 to attack our pinned knight a second time. And we don't want to take back with the queen, the rook, or the pawn. So I like to simply add a defender. And yeah, this blocks the bishop from defending our f-pawn, but we were going to gambit that pawn away anyways, and we know how to play these kinds of positions. Black has left the center vacant, and our pawns will be able to claim that space. Let's go back to this position where we started and consider another line. The next most common move is played 22% of the time and is e takes f4. We already have a full video dedicated to this position, though through a different move order. So we will skip to the immediate bishop to g4, played 15% of the time. Again, for simplicity, I like the move bishop to c4 because now we have reached an almost identical position to the last line considered, and it will be identical if Black plays knight to c6 here. But let's look at a different move for variety. Bishop takes f3. This is a weak move for Black because it allows us to put more pressure on f7. Now the queen is eyeing the f7 pawn, as well as the bishop. If Black plays something without thinking like bishop to e7, he will be in trouble after we open the f-file with pawn takes e5, and we threaten a devastating attack. And if he defends it, we have another secret weapon of castles, getting our rook to f1 and adding to the attack. So instead, black might play something like knight f6 to block the f-file further. We take in the center anyway to open up the f-file before black can do anything about it. And now we have a clever fork that may be difficult to see. Pause the video for a second to figure it out. Kudos if you found the move queen to b3, which forks the f7 pawn, and the b7 pawn. We have a 73% win rate in this position because it is so hard to defend. Let's say black plays the common mistake of queen to d7, which defends 7, but leaves us free to take on b7 and win the pawn and rook. Really, it is rarely beneficial for black to take our f3 knight because it graciously allows our queen to find the f-file, and we can usually punish black there quite easily. Okay, let's look at a new variation. The next most played move is knight to f6. This move changes things up for us just a little bit, because this move comes with the threat of taking our e-pawn. We can defend the pawn with d3, or knight to c3. They are both good, but I prefer knight to c3 so that we don't block our bishop in, and we can play bishop to c4 later, leading to some lines we are already familiar with. Now, more than likely we will transpose to some variations similar to those we have seen. For variety's sake, let's look at a less common move, g6. Black is hoping to develop his bishop to g7, but if you will remember the third reason we placed our knight on f3, you'll notice the conditions are just right for us to tear apart his center. This is largely possible because black's knight blocks the queen's diagonal to h4, so we take an exchange in the center. Black can try something like queen to e7 to counterattack in the center. This essentially puts two attackers on e4, and we only have one defender. But we don't have to move our knight out of the way. We simply defend our knight with d4, and black can't add any more attackers to e5. We have a +2 advantage according to the engine, and should be able to win this game. Let's look at one last move. The next most common, though played only 6% of the time, is the move f6. This move is fairly weak in general, as it opens up the black king. There's not much we can do about this at the moment, but we can try and expose the king even more with d4, attacking the center. This position looks quite complex, but actually it's pretty simple to play. What you need to understand is that we are not immediately going for trades in the center. We want to wait for black to take our pawn, where we can take back while getting a piece into the attack, like with bishop f4 or knight d4. Things can get complicated if black finds the strong moves d5 or f5, which can be a bit chaotic. If you are interested in those lines, go ahead and look at them further. However, in the 16,000 under 1,000 ELO games in this position, these moves have been found exactly 0 times, so it's probably not worth studying yet, but good to be aware of the idea. Most commonly, black will simply get one of his pieces out, like his bishop to g4 like we have seen, or his knight to c6. And remember, we are trying to entice black to play moves like e takes d4 or f4. So don't worry about the central tension at the moment. Simply develop a piece, say the knight, and eventually black will take in the center, or we will keep developing and end up with a fairly normal game. If he takes in the center at this point, like many do, we simply trade, and we'll find ourselves here in this dominant position. Black is fairly stuck and has no pieces out. We, on the other hand, have good prospects for our bishops and already have a couple pieces developed. Okay, that's really all you should care to know about this position at this point. This line is fairly rare and fairly easy to play, so I would focus your study time on other more challenging and common lines, but it is good to be aware of the ideas. Mostly we play in a similar fashion to how we are used to, getting the bishop out, waiting for e takes f4, so we can play d4, or we just simply play d3, if that doesn't happen. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.